cold smile that once captivated people. Only Danielle Colby, the woman who had captivated millions of viewers on American Pickers, now bowed her head, her hands shaking, her gaze empty. In that moment, the lens no longer reflected a TV star, but the naked image of a person facing the consequences of her actions. What had made the rebellious icon of American reality television fall so deeply? And those silent tears that day, were they sincere regret or just the bitter end of a prearranged game? From a relative unknown, Danielle Colby has risen to become the rebellious icon of American Pickers, a free spirit between the world of antiques and reality TV. She has never left the spotlight, not only because television has a hold on her, but also because she has never wanted to turn her back on it. Born and raised in Davenport, Iowa, a peaceful city in the Midwest, which seems to have nothing to do with the spotlight and vibrant catwalks, Danielle has broken all stereotypes early on. From a young age, she showed a rebellious, different spirit. Instead of pursuing a traditional education path, she immersed herself in the world of street art, living among creative communities, and quickly made a name for herself as a burlesque dancer with personality. A body covered in tattoos, a sharp gaze, a style that blends classic and modern. Wherever she goes, Danielle makes people turn their heads. Whether on stage or in the middle of a bustling flea market, she is always the center of attention. For Danielle, stripping is more than just a performance. It is a way for her to assert her freedom, a declaration of life as an unyielding woman. She founded the group L'Eustache, performing from Chicago to New Orleans, leaving a strong impression on the audience with her seductive and challenging appeal. The turning point came in 2004, when Danielle accidentally met Mike Wolfe, an old acquaintance who ran an antiques hunting business. He invited her to work as an office manager, a seemingly simple job revolving around paperwork and logistics. But in 2010, when American Pickers was born, everything changed. Initially, the show focused on the journey of Mike Wolfe and Frank Fritz, a duo traveling across America in search of forgotten treasures. Danielle only appeared briefly, a few phone calls, a few introductions, but it was her authenticity, her uniqueness, and her unmistakable spirit that quickly made her stand out. In a world full of men who loved antiques, Danielle emerged as a breath of fresh air, bright, determined, and unabashedly true to herself. As the seasons passed, Danielle's screen time increased. From a secretary in Iowa, she became a strong woman, contributing significantly to the valuation of artifacts, negotiations, and operation of a complex team. For many, she was the silent soul of the show. If Mike was the rhythm, Frank was the rustic, then Danielle was the identity wild, sharp, and energetic. Danielle's influence did not stop on television. On social media, she attracted hundreds of thousands of followers. She launched her own fashion line, designed punk and retro outfits, and organized independent art shows, gradually becoming a feminist icon in the male-dominated antique world. But the spotlight sometimes carries its shadow. The more famous Danielle became, the more she was caught in the vortex between Mike and Frank, two big personalities with different visions. Her increasingly important presence made her both indispensable and the center of all judgments and expectations. As her personal brand grew, the pressure to maintain an image of strong, authentic, different also grew heavier. An image that was required to stand out, but still fit within the framework that the audience wanted. In the world of reality television, Danielle Colby is more than just a face. She knows the rules. She knows when to speak up, when to keep quiet, when a smile can ease tension, and when a retreat can have a more powerful effect than any appearance. Her every move is carefully calculated, making her the perfect suspect when the storm begins. After the sudden death of her longtime friend and early life partner, Frank Fritz, the surviving diary entries put Danielle in a delicate position. From behind the scenes, she gradually stepped into the spotlight, using her wit and bravery to assert her position. It was an admirable journey. but television has proven that the spotlight can sometimes burn those who light it. The appeal of American Pickers comes not only from the valuable antiques, but also from the interaction between three contrasting but complementary personalities. Mike Wolfe, meticulous and always in control; Frank Fritz, approachable, rustic; and Danielle Colby, rebellious, intelligent, and charming. But behind the screen, things are not as peaceful as the audience thinks. The conflict between Mike and Frank has long simmered, stemming from the direction of the show, the division of interests, and especially Danielle's rapid rise. A former editor of the History Channel revealed that during the period 2016-2019, Mike repeatedly expressed his concerns when Danielle's image became more prominent. He felt that her punk style went against the original spirit of the show, this person said. What complicates matters, however, is the close relationship between Mike and Danielle. A bond that once worked, but also deepened the distance between Mike and Frank. Frank, who had been with Mike since the early days, gradually felt pushed aside. The once harmonious chemistry now turned into disagreements, from business strategy to filming locations. Danielle, who initially tried to remain neutral, was eventually caught up in the vortex of tension. According to people in the crew, the arguments were no longer about antiques, but became a silent battle for power between three people who were once a harmonious group. At the end of 2019, Frank officially withdrew due to health reasons, but many understood that the decision was not as simple or easy as announced. In an interview with Antique Monthly, Frank said bluntly, "I no longer feel like I'm a trusted part of the team. Everything happens behind my back." These words were given added weight when a series of leaked internal emails showed that Danielle used to send Mike private reports, from schedules, partners, to activities outside the show. Things that had previously been agreed upon. There is no clear villain in the story. There are only people who used to be close, now standing on different sides, caught up in the harsh waves of fame and television. And in the midst of it all, Danielle Colby, the woman who stepped from the shadows into the light, is still the center of attention that the audience cannot take their eyes off. The storm of suspicion began when a series of private messages between Danielle and Mike were unexpectedly leaked. In one shocking exchange, Danielle wrote, "Frank is out of control. If he comes back, everything will fall apart." The message was sent just weeks before Frank left the show, sparking a wave of speculation. Although Danielle later insisted it was just a knee-jerk reaction to a moment of heightened emotions, the consequences were far more devastating than she could have imagined. The tension was further exacerbated when a personal diary entry from Frank was leaked after a seemingly innocent gig. In it, he wrote, "I don't trust Danielle anymore. Even though she's always smiling, I feel like I'm being watched. I know they're secretly pushing me away." According to behavioral psychologists, these lines reflect a deep sense of isolation and betrayal, a clear sign of mental instability. A former production assistant recalled the unsettling moment when Frank abruptly left the set after catching Mike and Danielle chatting privately in the car. "I knew they were hiding something," he said before leaving without saying goodbye. Danielle remained silent, speaking only once. "I always considered Frank my family. If he felt hurt, I'm really sorry, but there were things that were beyond my control." It was the word control that became the focus of the subsequent accusations. From being the person in charge of the backstage, Danielle gradually took control of the schedule, the partners, and even the locations, things that were previously under the control of all three of them. Mike increasingly trusted her intuition and strategy, and when Frank left, Danielle's influence became more evident than ever. A leaked internal document from 2023 revealed that Danielle had full access to auction data, partner information, and inventory lists, something that previously only Mike had. She was also the only person other than Mike authorized to sign commercial contracts. The closeness between the two, combined with Danielle's quiet control over many key elements, fueled a series of theories that had previously been just behind-the-scenes rumors. The climax came when the FBI announced an official investigation into Frank's unnatural death. An internal conflict had now become a serious criminal case. The media began to reveal seemingly insignificant details. Danielle's absence from photo shoots, her private trips with Mike to Puerto Rico, where she bought a property worth more than $400,000, paid for through a shell company linked to the production team. From the creative icon of American Pickers, Danielle Colby is now painted as the complete opposite, a sharp, powerful woman who can turn a TV show around. Public opinion is clearly divided. Some defend her as a victim of a ruthless machine, but many also believe that she is the key cog in a meticulously arranged script. The biggest question begins to ring. Is Danielle's aura the result of natural acumen, or is it the product of a cold strategy to eliminate those who stand in her way? Is it intentional, or is it an unintended consequence in a fierce and calculating environment? While the truth remains a mystery, what has happened and is happening is enough to keep all eyes on Danielle. At a fateful crossroads, she is faced with a choice: to prove herself a survivor in a cruel game, or become a symbol of regretful downfall. And with the name Frank Fritz now linked to a federal investigation, the dark picture continues to be painted stroke by stroke, dramatic and mysterious. On September 30th, 2024, the American entertainment world was shocked when news of the sudden passing of Frank Fritz, one of the familiar faces of the show American Pickers, spread quickly across media platforms. At the age of 60, Frank passed away quietly. The cause was announced as complications from a stroke that had required him to be treated for a long time. But then, that silence was quickly broken by suspicious details behind it. Just a few weeks after the private funeral, shocking details were suddenly revealed. A group of federal agents suddenly inspected the hospital where Frank had been treated after receiving anonymous complaints about illegal interference with medical protocols. There were signs of unusual drug dosage adjustments and even shady communications between Frank's close relatives and hospital staff, most notably Danielle Colby. A turning point came when Frank's personal diary was discovered in an old warehouse in Davenport. In it, he wrote, "I know someone is trying to take me out of the picture. Every morning I wake up and my meds are mixed up. Danielle says she's checking the doses, but I don't trust her anymore." That shaky, tense note turned the tables. Frank's death was now more than an accident. It could have been the result of careful planning. A clip from a security camera in Frank's neighborhood the night he went missing shows a black SUV parked in front of his house. Image analysis software identified the driver as Mike Wolf, and the passenger seat, according to the authorities' facial recognition, was a 74% match to Danielle Colby. At the same time, data from the telecommunications tower showed that Danielle's phone was in the area between 8:30 and 10:15 p.m., the exact time Frank suddenly lost contact with those around him. The culmination of suspicion came from a series of text messages recovered from the telecommunications backup system. According to the court order, the content of the exchange between Danielle and Mike showed signs of abnormality. Danielle: "He's alone. No one checked until morning. The window is closed." Mike: "Done. Delete all of this." The text was sent at 9:47 p.m., less than an hour before neighbors found Frank unconscious. As the investigation expanded, another possibility gradually emerged: a financial motive. Frank had filed a lawsuit against a company affiliated with Antique Archaeology, the brand founded by Mike Wolf, over a dispute over profits from the program. The lawsuit was still in effect when Frank died. Just 2 days after his death, a $175,000 transfer from Vintage Solutions LLC, an offshore company linked to Mike, was made to Danielle Colby's personal bank account. The transaction further confused the public and raised a series of unanswered questions. While the truth is still being clarified by the authorities, the public is shaken by the details of the interweaving of trust, power, and behind the scenes of a beloved television show. The FBI quickly summoned Danielle Colby as a key witness in the investigation into Frank Fritz's death. The media immediately exploded with shocking headlines. Danielle Colby from TV icon to key link in a criminal case. Frank's death was no longer considered an accident, but an unsolved question. What was even more suspicious was that Danielle remained silent for a long time, refusing to comment, while all the evidence seemed to bear her mark. At a brief press conference, Danielle's lawyer, Margaret Wilson, declared, "My client is innocent. What is happening is just a fabrication based on incomplete facts." However, public opinion was not easily convinced. A CBS poll conducted in November 2024 found that 63% of respondents believed Danielle was directly involved in Frank's death. 27% suspected she had a financial role, and only 10% believed she was completely innocent. When the financial reports were released, the situation became even more confusing. Danielle was identified as the representative who signed at least 3 large production contracts, including a licensing deal worth up to $3 million, signed shortly after Frank left the show. Since mid-2022, her personal spending has skyrocketed, buying real estate, collecting classic cars, and investing in personal projects. These details make the incident more than just a television scandal. It becomes a case that clearly reflects the loss of public trust in once-beloved shows. Frank Fritz, who once embodied the down-to-earth honesty of American pickers, is now at the center of a case that has shocked the nation. And Danielle Colby, who once starred alongside him on screen, is facing more serious questions than ever. On January 17, 2025, the trial officially began at the federal courthouse in Des Moines, Iowa. The courtroom was packed from dawn, with reporters from major news outlets to pop culture YouTube channels. Outside, hundreds of fans gathered, some holding prayer signs, others holding the chilling message, "She knew the truth." Over the course of the 6-week trial, the once lovable Danielle Colby was slowly peeled away. Federal prosecutor Bradley Harris opened with a chilling statement. Danielle did not cause her death, but she opened the door for it to happen. Text messages presented in court left the courtroom speechless. Among the 218 messages between Danielle and Mike Wolf, she asked, "Should we call a doctor or just leave it alone?" Mike replied, "It's too late." That was the fateful night Frank went missing. The financial investigation team also confirmed suspicious payments, including 6 transfers from a Luxembourg bank to an account in Danielle's name just 2 days after Frank's death, marked business advice, although no specific projects were confirmed. Several witnesses spoke out. One production assistant said she heard Danielle say, "If Frank comes back, it's all over." Another recalled tearing a piece of paper from Frank's notebook and tucking it into her jacket. The defense countered that the evidence had been edited, the financials were speculative, and the witnesses were biased. The defense strategy shifted to portraying Danielle as a manipulated woman, trapped in the web of power of Mike Wolf, arguably the most influential person on the team. A psychologist was even called in to analyze the codependent relationship between the two, emphasizing that Danielle was more of a victim than a perpetrator. However, as the evidence mounted, the image of Danielle Colby, the eccentric woman once loved in American pickers, began to crumble. Viewers across the country watched the trial unfold with an indescribable sense of regret, shock, and, once again, a loss of faith in what had once been seen as truthful on television. The prosecution released a never-before-seen video of a heated argument between Danielle and Mike in an office in February 2022. Although the audio was low, Danielle's voice was clear. "I can't keep cleaning up this mess. If you keep doing this, I'm leaving. We're done." The clip wasn't shocking, but it was the final piece of the puzzle that completed the picture of complicity. The trial reached its climax on the 19th day when Danielle Colby took the stand. She appeared in casual clothes with light makeup, her eyes red. For more than 5 hours, she recounted what she experienced in the last 3 years of Frank's life. "I loved Frank like a brother. but the relationship between him and Mike turned into a war that I was caught in the middle of. Danielle admitted to sending the thoughtless messages and confessed that she had a feeling something was wrong, but didn't have the courage to intervene. When the prosecutor asked, "Did you know that Mike Wolf intended to harm Frank Fritz?" Danielle was silent for 12 seconds. Then, in a trembling voice, she replied, "I don't know for sure, but I had a feeling that something terrible was going to happen, and I didn't do anything." The courtroom fell silent, not out of surprise, but because everyone knew it. Danielle had not directly caused the tragedy, but she also did not prevent it, even though she could have. On sentencing day, the sky was as gray as the air. Judge Diana Moore, who presided over Julian Harper's infamous 2017 trial, delivered her sentence in a decisive tone. Ms. Colby did not directly cause the death of Frank Fritz, but her compromise, her silence, and her turning away contributed to this tragedy. Danielle was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison, with no parole for the first 12. Hearing the sentence, she collapsed on the courtroom table. Her familiar face, once seen on millions of screens, now filled with tears. No one approached, no words of comfort, no applause, just a chilling silence, as if a beloved television show had ended with an unexpected finale. Outside, reporters quietly left the courtroom. A few held up their phones, updating the brief headline, "Reality TV star sentenced to 18 years." The crowd outside the gate no longer chanted slogans. They just stood there staring at the gate that had just closed behind an icon who would never return. Danielle Colby, a name, an image, a downfall. The sentence not only ended her television career, but also brought down an entire ecosystem that revolved around her name, like a structure built on a fragile foundation. When the cornerstone is removed, everything falls apart. Just a day later, the History Channel issued a brief statement. "Based on the recent ruling, we will be ending all collaborations with Danielle Colby. All content featuring her will be temporarily removed." Episodes of American Pickers that featured her immediately disappeared from online platforms. The show's YouTube channel disabled comments, and a series of videos she appeared in were deleted. Danielle's vintage clothing line, Cole's Rust Revival, her brainchild, quietly shut down. Undelivered orders were refunded in full. Burlesque shows in New Orleans, Austin, and San Diego were canceled, costing her an estimated $300,000 on social media alone. Danielle's Instagram account, which once had more than 420,000 followers, fell silent. Old posts full of messages about freedom, creativity, and feminism are now flooded with thousands of critical comments. The online community is deeply divided. One side feels betrayed, the other still tries to defend the woman who dared to be true to herself. Notably, those who were close to her have also remained silent. Mike Wolf, who appeared intimately in many photos with Danielle, has not issued a statement. According to a source from Variety, Mike met privately with the History Channel, pledging to keep quiet in exchange for the opportunity to develop a new show unrelated to the incident. The deceased Frank Fritz has now become a symbol of tragedy. On Reddit, Facebook, and TikTok, fans organize Frank's Day to remember a man they believe was forgotten and ultimately pushed to the edge. A GoFundMe campaign called Justice for Frank has raised more than $1.2 million in just 3 weeks for organizations that support victims of manipulation and emotional abuse. No more laughter, no more treasure hunts, just unanswered questions, and a regretful final chapter for an icon once loved by millions. Throughout the trial and after her sentencing, Danielle Colby remained largely silent, except for her official testimony in court. However, a source close to her revealed that she had written a handwritten letter to her daughter which read, "I used to think I was strong because I was true to myself, but I have come to realize that being true without responsibility is just a false freedom." The statement revealed her inner conflict between the image the public once admired and the painful truth she was facing. Cultural communication expert Emily Travis from Northwestern University believes that Danielle's fall was not simply the result of a lawsuit, but also the cumulative result of growing skepticism from the audience. In an article for The Atlantic, she commented, "We are living in a post-truth era, when audiences can no longer distinguish between what is real and what is staged. Any scandal can be the last straw." And indeed, Danielle's case has sparked a new wave of investigations, raising questions about the authenticity of reality television. In the 2 months since the verdict, at least 3 major shows have come under scrutiny for alleged staging and manipulation. The Federal Communications Commission, FCC, quickly enacted a new regulatory framework that requires transparency about scripts, payments, and the authenticity of broadcast events. The case is not just a legal shock, but also marks a major shift in how the television industry operates. The artifact-collecting community, on which Danielle Colby was once revered, has also had to adjust. This scandal exposes a huge ethical gap in the commercialization of history, said a representative for Sabi, a company that specializes in authenticating artifacts. "We can't turn culture into a staged drama." The statement sparked a deep debate about the distortion of historical values for commercial purposes. For many who once considered Danielle a feminist icon, this fall raises a difficult question. Was she truly a strong woman who dared to live her truth? Or was she just someone who chose to stay silent to protect herself? One article commented that she had inspired thousands of women to step into the light, but that light, when staged, became a fire that burned the person who created it. According to the verdict, Danielle was banned from appearing on television, running a business, or participating in artistic activities for at least 10 years. However, her greatest loss was not her time or her career, but the loss of the moral authority that had made her a leading voice for a generation. That fall was not just the fall of an individual, but also the death knell of an ideology that had elevated reality television to the status of a symbol of truth. What was once promoted as authentic and natural was now exposed as a product of elaborate staging. One person fell, and the entire industry was shaken. From then on, reality television entered a period of crisis of confidence. Immediately after the trial ended, a series of major magazines such as The New Yorker, Vulture, and Wired launched independent investigations, concluding that from season 6 onwards, American Pickers was no longer a true reality show. Behind-the-scenes documents showed that many of the scenes were prearranged, the items were carefully selected, and even the reactions of the hosts were directed. A former crew member shared, "We had spreadsheets for every item, every desired expression, and even scripts for seemingly impromptu negotiations." Those revelations caused the public to lose faith not only in American Pickers, but in the entire reality television genre. Shows like Storage Wars, Deadliest Catch, or Gold Rush were quickly called out on social media with the hashtag #AshadReality or La, reflecting the disillusionment of audiences when they realized that what they once believed to be real turned out to be just a show. For the first time in nearly a decade, the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, is holding a public hearing with representatives from reality TV production companies. The focus of the hearing is on transparency in unscripted programming and the accountability producers have to the public. A bill called the Real Entertainment Accountability Legislation, REAL Act, has been proposed that would require unscripted shows to disclose production rates, how much they are paid, and what scenes have been re-edited. While the bill is still under debate, it has already sparked a backlash from both lawmakers and the entertainment industry. Streaming platforms have also been quick to adjust. Netflix has pulled more than 25 reality shows in the 3 months since the Danielle Colby scandal, and has issued disclaimers acknowledging that some segments may have been staged for entertainment purposes. Meanwhile, YouTube has quietly tweaked its algorithm, deprioritizing videos labeled Authentic Discovery, in an effort to avoid misleading viewers. The impact of these changes extends beyond the media. Antique fairs, which once benefited from the popularity of reality TV, saw a 35% drop in sales in the first quarter of 2025. Now, collectors are asked not just about the physical value of their items, but also about the authenticity of the story behind them. A survey of 1,000 collectors by Collectors Weekly found that 64% believe reality TV has overshadowed the raw nature of the hobby. On social media, trust in reality TV personalities has waned. Previous praise has given way to skepticism. We used to see them as storytellers, but they're just directors without cameras, one widely shared tweet read. That skepticism extends beyond TV personalities to content creators on TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube, who often mix fact and fiction to attract viewers. The Danielle Colby case has become a wake-up call. The public is no longer so quick to accept reality shows as absolute truth. Prestigious universities like Stanford, NYU, and UCLA have included the scandal in their communications courses, citing it as a prime example of how authenticity can be used to manipulate audiences' emotions. The Colby scandal was like the Watergate of reality TV, one scholar said at a Columbia Journalism Institute conference. It forced the industry to confront itself, not to kill reality TV, but to reclaim the transparency it should have had in the first place. There are events that start out as individual cases but create aftershocks that ripple through the system, from viewers to producers to digital platforms to even academic environments. Danielle's downfall was not just the result of individual mistakes, but also evidence of a lack of control in an entire industry. Unfortunately, by the time things broke, it was too late to fix them. After the trial, Danielle was transferred to Alderson Federal Prison, a medium-security facility known for holding women involved in high-profile cases. Stripped of the spotlight and now inmate DC 044, Danielle Colby is entering a completely different chapter of her life, one written in silence, isolation, and deep reflection. With a sentence of no less than 12 years, she has chosen to withdraw from the prison community, rarely appearing in the gym or joining in the dining hall conversations. Instead, Danielle finds solace in the prison library, where she frequents books, writes in her diary, and ponders the ideas of ethics, psychology, and activist memoirs. She doesn't read to pass the time, says a librarian. She reads to reflect and learn about herself. From behind bars, Danielle keeps in touch with her daughter through letters, words that are sincere, unapologetically, and unbegging for forgiveness. Remember, I was an inspiration, but also a disappointment, both in one person. I am not a monster, I am human, and I was wrong, she wrote. Those words were not just a confession, but also a step forward in facing the truth and responsibility. Danielle is currently writing a memoir, tentatively titled Behind the Name Colby, that will share an honest look at the ambition, mistakes, and murky moral choices in the quest for fame. Beacon Press has expressed interest in the manuscript, on the condition that all proceeds go to the Frank Fritz Legacy Foundation, an organization founded by Frank's family to preserve the community's history. Meanwhile, Danielle's legal team has filed an appeal with the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals, arguing that her sentence was too harsh and based largely on public sentiment. However, legal experts say the chances of an appeal succeeding are slim, given that the original trial was not significantly flawed. Still, a small group of supporters remain hopeful about redemption and a chance at reintegration. On social media, public opinion continues to be divided. She didn't kill anyone, but she kept quiet, wrote one Reddit user. That's something to criticize, but also something to think about. Many are still wondering whether Danielle deserves a second chance, and whether society is ready to embrace a convicted felon who can still inspire. For now, Danielle's future remains uncertain. But what is clear is that she is trying to rewrite her story, hoping that one day the name Danielle Colby will be remembered not just for her conviction, but for the awakening and lessons she left behind. The reality TV industry is also changing. Since the trial, audiences have become more sober, less willing to believe in the coincidence of unscripted shows. Those who once loved American Pickers now watch old episodes with a skeptical eye. Is this real? What did Danielle know, and when? These questions are no longer uncommon. However, despite the scandal, some still cherish the positive influence Danielle once had. A history teacher in Kansas once wrote, "Danielle Colby made my students, especially the girls, love American culture through antiques. The scandal is heartbreaking, but it cannot erase the good things she planted." Today, transparency in television is being re-examined. Producers are becoming more cautious, and laws are adjusting to an era where the line between fact and fiction is increasingly blurred. Like it or not, Danielle Colby has become a defining figure in that transformation, a character who has fallen apart, but also a symbol of a necessary wake-up call in reality TV history. As the door closes on a new chapter in Danielle Colby's life, we see not only a woman who was once a symbol of strength and rebellion, but also a person struggling with her mistakes and finding redemption in a world full of contradictions. Her journey from the spotlight to the darkness of prison is not only a story of fall, but also a lesson in change, self-awareness, and the desire to find oneself. The important question we need to ask is not just whether Danielle deserves a second chance, but whether our society can be forgiving and create opportunities for rebirth. Or will we let those who have made mistakes fade into oblivion? Whether her every move is forward or backward, Danielle Colby proves that it is never too late to change and rewrite your own story. And no matter how public opinion changes, the truth remains in the untold stories, in the valuable lessons that each of us can learn. Thank you for following this story. Don't forget to share your thoughts on this journey, because this is not just Danielle's story, it is all of ours. I have to say we are very lucky. For the past 13 years, the team has been like a second family. Because of that, everyone I work with has a very special relationship with Frank. Have you ever wondered how I get along with everyone? Especially when I am the only woman in a group of men, but the wonderful thing is they always treat me like a sister, always protect me, respect me, and love me in the most sincere way. Over the course of more than a decade on the air, American Pickers has gone beyond the framework of a simple reality TV show about antique hunting. It has become a symbol of friendship, enduring companionship, and memorable journey of three seemingly opposite but strangely connected people. Mike Wolfe, the founder with a burning passion, Frank Fritz, the loyal companion, and Danielle Colby, a smart, sharp woman who always brings a special energy behind the scenes. It is the combination of them that creates a miracle, close and genuine, helping the show touch the hearts of millions of viewers, not only in the U.S., but also around the world. But like any journey, there is always a time when it has to turn in a different direction. In 2020, Frank Fritz abruptly left the show, leaving fans shocked with countless unanswered questions. From rumors of personal conflicts, health conditions, to suspicions of internal rifts, all are just speculation, because the people involved always keep quiet. That silence makes the public even more curious. It was only recently when Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby unexpectedly appeared at the hearing related to Frank, who is currently living under guardianship after a serious stroke, that the first pieces of the truth gradually emerged. So what really happened? In today's video, we will take a look back at that emotional moment. A quiet but emotional hearing, where the presence of familiar faces made the viewers' hearts ache. It was not a tense or noisy court session. On the contrary, the atmosphere was so quiet that it was suffocating. Mike Wolfe walked in looking tired. His gray suit made him look more silent than ever. Beside him, Danielle Colby, usually sharp and charismatic, was unusually quiet that day. Her hair was tied back, her light makeup revealing her red eyes. They didn't need to say much, because their presence said it all. This was no longer a carefully staged episode, no longer a TV story. It was real life. Two old friends standing silently beside a person who had traveled together through many journeys across America, now struggling with a major life event. That trial was not just about guardianship. It was like a gentle but profound reminder for all who loved American Pickers that behind the camera lights are real people with real emotions and inevitable losses. Although now each person has chosen their own path, the friendship, memories, and silences will always remain, quiet, profound, and unforgettable. In the documents filed in court, Mike Wolf and Danielle Colby are not named as plaintiffs or defendants. They are not involved in any legal dispute. They are simply two people who were deeply attached to Frank Fritz, an indispensable part of the glorious years of his life, and now return, carrying with them the silent torment of things left unsaid. Their presence is not to create noise or attract public attention, but is an important piece, helping the court better understand a relationship that was once sincere, once deep, and now has many unanswered questions. Frank's legal representatives did not prevent them from sharing. On the contrary, they considered it a necessary part to make the picture of Frank's life more complete and truthful, from which the court could make a correct and humane decision about his future. But Mike and Danielle did not come forward immediately. They sat there quietly, as if trying to find the courage to say what had been weighing on their hearts for years. Mike was the first to speak. Not loudly, not in defense, just a deep, slightly trembling voice, but strangely sincere. "I'm not here to justify myself. I'm here to apologize." The words echoed in the courtroom like a slow, heavy drumbeat. Danielle sat next to him, saying nothing, but her red eyes and clasped hands said it all. Silence filled the room. No more typing, no more turning of paper, as if the whole room was holding its breath to listen to something more sacred than any defense. No one had ever thought this reunion would take place in a place like this. Cold, without stage lights, without laughter, without the familiar cheers. But that moment, when all the facades were removed, became an opportunity for real people to face each other. Not in a television role, but in the sincerity, pain, and regret of everyday life. Mike Wolf, who had traveled across America with Frank to hunt for forgotten treasures, was no longer a television character that day. He was just a man facing the past, the things that could not be returned. "I should have called Frank," he said, his voice low, his eyes looking straight ahead. "I should have asked him how he was, but I didn't." That confession, simple but profound, left many people present that day speechless. Anyone who had watched nearly 300 episodes of American Pickers knew the friendship between Mike and Frank was the heart of the show. They understood each other through their eyes, sharing every journey, every moment. But then the tight filming schedule, the pressure of success, the expectations from the audience, all gradually pulled them apart. And when they realized, the distance was too great to be easily mended. Mike did not blame anyone, nor did he try to avoid it. He took responsibility, that the show's halo had overshadowed the most precious thing, friendship. "I let work take me away," he said, his eyes slightly tearing up. "I let my career overshadow the most precious thing between us, Frank." No excuses, no script needed. Sometimes just having enough courage to admit you were wrong and saying sorry is enough to touch the hearts of others. And that moment, even without a camera lens, is still engraved in the minds of those who once loved the trio Mike, Frank, Danielle. This is no longer the story of a TV show. This is a human story, real, painful, and also full of hope for healing, however belated. No goodbyes, no explanations. Frank Fritz's sudden absence from the show left fans in shock. After just a few episodes, questions began to pour in. Where is Frank? What happened? Are Mike and Frank still friends? Question after question spreading across social media like a wave of worry, but in response to all was silence. Mike Wolf did not explain. No corrections, just a long, heavy, and confusing silence. In court, for the first time in years, Mike spoke up about what millions of viewers had always been thinking about. His voice was hoarse, his eyes heavy. "I thought everything would be okay, that we would talk again, that everything would go back to the way it was. But I was wrong." He bowed his head, sincerely admitting, "I let the silence go on for too long, and that's what kept us apart forever." Mike looked around the room, his eyes landing on an empty chair, the one that had been Frank's. No one was sitting there. He paused for a few seconds as if addressing his old friend. I used to think I had time, but none of us have as much time as we thought. The words rang out not as an excuse, but as a wake-up call for Mike himself, and for anyone who has ever missed an opportunity to hold on to a fading friendship. There was no blaming, no evasion. Mike stood there, plain and honest, facing himself. Frank and I had differences, both professional and personal. At some point, we just didn't know how to talk to each other the way we used to. And I didn't know how to bridge that gap. Frank shared his feelings in a short interview in 2021. Just one sentence, but enough to make the listener's heart ache. I haven't heard anything from Mike. Not a word. Today, standing in court, Mike did not deny it. He nodded quietly. I failed. I was too busy to do the right thing. I kept thinking I could call him any time, not knowing that one day that would no longer be true. This was not an excuse, but a deep awakening of a man who had lost a friend because of things left unsaid. Mike looked far away, as if looking at some invisible place, where memories still held Frank's image. He was not just a companion on television. Frank was my best friend when I was young, the one who went through years of aspirations and dreams with me. His voice choked. I didn't call him, and now I can only say it here, hoping that somewhere Frank can hear it. Todd Harris, a well-known media expert, commented, "It's rare for a celebrity to have the courage to admit a mistake without giving reasons. But what Mike Wolf did today, without excuses, without the veneer of a TV show, was healing for himself, for Frank, if he can still feel it, and for those who loved them." Mike concluded his speech with a quiet voice. "I don't expect anyone to forgive me right away. I'm not sure Frank can understand what I'm trying to say, but I have to say it, because I can't live in silence any longer." As he stepped down from the podium, the room fell silent. It was no longer the awkward silence of before, but the silence of the truth just spoken, of pain, of regret, and of a faint hope of forgiveness, even though it was late. If Mike Wolf is the one who steps into the light to face the public and the truth, then Danielle Colby is the one who quietly steps out of the shadows, where she has been standing quietly for 3 years, stuck between two close friends, carrying the burden of silence and regret. In every long-running TV series, there is always a character who is not noisy, but is the silent soul of the group. With American Pickers, that person is Danielle. She does not travel all over America like Mike or Frank, but she is the support behind the scenes, the one who coordinates all the calls, contracts, papers, and sometimes even the emotional conversations. Because she is in the middle of the two fronts, Danielle is the one who most clearly witnesses the cracks starting to appear. When she appeared in court, she was no longer the familiar image with the colorful performance costume. Instead, there was simplicity, like a silent message. Today is not about me, but about something that has broken silently. Frank, her friend and companion for nearly 15 years, is a part of her memory that she cannot forget. Danielle's voice trembles. "I should have done something. I saw the distance between them growing, and I kept thinking that they would talk again, but they didn't, and I didn't do anything." Without the need for sensational statements, Danielle's sharing is haunting because of its painful sincerity, the pain of someone who witnessed a friendship broken but was powerless to save it. On social media, she chose silence, no explanation, no bias. But according to those close to her, Danielle tried many times to reconnect the emotional bond between Mike and Frank through text messages, emails, even through mutual friends. All fell into a hopeless void. "I feel like a child in a family where the parents don't talk to each other anymore," she said, her eyes distant. "I didn't want to choose sides, but I couldn't pretend I didn't see anything. And in the end, I chose to stay silent. That's what bothered me the most." That silence didn't come from indifference, but from fear. Fear of hurting both of them. fear of making things worse, fear of losing what was left. And so, she withdrew. She gave them space to work things out, only to see the gap grow ever more unbridgeable. There had been speculation that Danielle sided with Mike, because she had continued to appear on the show when Frank was absent. But this time, she categorically denied it. "I didn't choose anyone," she said, her eyes determined. "I just chose to stand with the memories when we were a team, a family." Then she pulled out a piece of paper, not to read, but to hold in her hand as a spiritual refuge. "I miss Frank. I miss the three of us laughing, arguing, eating lunch together in the office. Those little things I can't call him up and tell him anymore." Indeed, since suffering a massive stroke in July 2022, Frank Fritz has largely disappeared from the outside world. According to the Quad City Times, he is living under strict medical supervision, with extensive damage to the brain region associated with memory and movement. These after effects have caused Frank to not only lose the ability to function normally, but also gradually withdraw from the connections that once held him close. Danielle Colby is one of the few people who is still allowed to visit him, but even those rare meetings have become fragile and full of regret. Frank is not always lucid enough to recognize her. The distance is no longer just geographical, but a chasm of time and memory. In 2023, Danielle posted a video that was only 30 seconds long. She sat in her car, her eyes red, her face blank. "I didn't want to make this video," she whispered, "but I have to say it. I miss Frank, and I just wish things could go back to the way they were." No background music, no stage lighting, just genuine sadness. And yet the video touched more than 1 million hearts in less than 24 hours. In court, Danielle spoke clearly for the first time about something she had kept hidden for so long, that continuing to work with Mike did not mean turning her back on Frank. "Sometimes you have to move on because life doesn't wait," she said. "But that doesn't mean I forget the people who have been with me a long way." The sentence sounds simple, but in that context, it cut deep into the listener's heart. Everyone has to move on, but not everyone can let go. And in a world of broken relationships, not because of mistakes, but because of silences that last too long, the lingering pain is what lingers. Dr. Laura Gibson, a social psychologist at the University of Chicago, once commented, "Danielle represents the image of the emotional mediator, the person who has no power to make decisions but suffers all the consequences, a role that is silent, often misunderstood, and very vulnerable." Danielle did not cry in court, but her eyes, deep, quiet, and full of pain, said it all. When talking about Frank, her voice choked. "I don't know if Frank can still hear me, but if he can, I just want him to know that I miss him, and I'm sorry for not having the courage to keep the three of us together." The whole room was silent. Many people could not hold back their tears, not because of a great shock, but because of the simple sincerity, because of the sadness that each of us has touched at least once, the feeling of losing something that could have been kept, if only we had been a little braver. Because sometimes you don't have to do anything wrong to make someone leave. Just keep quiet for too long, and you can lose someone who used to be your whole world. After all the laughter, the journeys to find ancient artifacts that have been broadcast, there is still a little-known story. A story of friendship, a silence, and a lingering regret that has lasted through the years. There was no laughter, no witty dialogue, and no editing to lighten the mood. In court testimony, both Mike Wolfe and Danielle Colby insisted that their relationship with Frank Fritz did not fall apart because of any specific event. There was no backstage scandal, no heated argument, and no betrayal as many people believe. Everything happened quietly, silently, so quietly that no one noticed until it was too late. There was no clear moment, Mike shared. There was no fateful day, no milestone. It just gradually changed. The calls became less frequent. The texts were no longer returned quickly. Conversations that used to last hours were now reduced to minutes. The silences, seemingly harmless, became signs of a friendship slowly cracking. Yale professor Linda Hemmings calls this phenomenon silent erosion. When there is no earthquake, but small tremors, constant and unnoticed, are enough to erode the foundation of a relationship. And perhaps that is what happened to Frank and Mike. Mike was busier than ever, expanding the American Pickers brand, organizing exhibitions, meeting partners, and promoting products based on the program. Frank, on the other hand, remained loyal to the simple, familiar things: antique hunting trips, quiet country roads, his old truck, and his morning coffee. Danielle once said, "Frank doesn't like change. He keeps things the same, and that makes him feel safe. Mike never stands still." It was this opposition that gradually created a distance, not because either was wrong, but simply because they were no longer on the same page. By 2018, Frank's health had begun to decline. He was forced to take a break from filming to recover from a spinal injury. While Frank was absent, the show continued, a strategic decision that led many viewers to believe Frank had been replaced. Court documents show that it was at this point that Frank began to feel left out. "I remember when he had back surgery," Mike admitted. "We kept filming, thinking he would be back soon. But I never asked him if he felt left out. Looking back, I wish I had." That same year, several members of the crew, those who were close to Frank, left. Without his familiar circle, Frank began to withdraw. One crew member, who asked to remain anonymous, said that Frank often sat quietly alone between takes. "He used to be the one to liven things up with jokes, but now he hardly says anything." Danielle has felt the change, too. She has shared with Mike her concerns about Frank becoming more withdrawn, but at the time, they all believed it was just a phase, that Frank would bounce back. "We thought he just needed time," Danielle says. "But sometimes believing things will be okay means we don't act, and we miss opportunities that will never come back." Then in 2020, when the COVID-19 pandemic hit, all filming was forced to stop. Everyone returned to their own homes, and the small cracks that had been quietly appearing suddenly became distances that were difficult to heal. Nearly 8 months passed after that hiatus, and there was not a single text or call between Mike and Frank. "I don't know why," Mike confessed. "Maybe I thought Frank was angry or just needed some time." But the truth was not so simple. They had misunderstood each other. Frank did not return. No goodbyes, no official announcements, no shared statuses. It was not until 2021, when news of Frank's serious health problems began to spread, that both Mike and Danielle suddenly realized something heartbreaking. They had lost their friend long before the disease appeared. "I realized I had known nothing about Frank's life for almost 2 years," Mike choked out. "It was unspeakably uncomfortable." In court, no one forced them to say anything. But what silenced the courtroom was not the law. It was the truth, stark and unyielding. When we stop actively connecting, sometimes it causes us to lose the people who matter most. They don't walk away in anger, but in silence, like the way Frank quietly exited the screen unnoticed. Frank Fritz, a trusted companion on the journey of American Pickers, was an indispensable part of the audience's heart. Without fanfare, without embellishment, he left his mark with his simple humor and natural sincerity. When Frank was no longer present, it was not just a human absence, it was an emotional void that no one could easily fill. Frank never spoke. He did not write a farewell letter, did not refute or explain to the media. He just quietly withdrew from the spotlight. But that silence was not a choice, but the result of a serious incident. According to medical records, in July 2022, Frank suffered a severe stroke. The stroke left him paralyzed on one side, damaging the area of the brain related to language and short-term memory. From a person who could remember every detail about classic cars after just a glance, Frank now cannot remember the name of the doctor who was treating him. He lost the ability to care for himself, could not manage his finances, and could no longer live alone. Currently, Frank lives under the care of a legal guardian, requiring comprehensive support in daily life. Frank's story is not just the tragedy of a stroke. It is also a reminder of the silent pressures, the mental gaps that no one sees. Mike once admitted that the isolation and feeling of loneliness had been with Frank for a long time. It was just a pity that he realized it when it was too late. Sometimes he would recognize me and smile, Danielle said in court, choking back tears. But other times, his eyes would just be a silent void. Every time I left the room, I felt like a piece of my past was broken a little bit more. Frank is not married, nor does he have children. His closest relative is a cousin who is now his legal guardian. But in legal documents, Mike and Danielle are listed as the two people with the deepest relationship with Frank, not out of obligation, but because of their strong bond over the years. The court looks not just at the financial or professional capabilities of the guardian, but also at the emotional connection. And that's what makes Mike and Danielle's presence so important. They are not there to defend themselves nor to justify themselves. They are there to affirm that Frank will not have to continue on the journey alone. Although the courtroom never heard a word from Frank, his presence still filled the room, in every story, every look. At one point, Danielle couldn't help but remember what Frank had said, before things took a turn for the worse. "We may not work together anymore, but I hope we can still be friends." A simple statement, but now it rang like a heartbreaking echo from the past, a message that was missed. According to a 2021 report by Dr. Harold Simons at Johns Hopkins Hospital, after a stroke, many patients not only lose their ability to move and speak, but also become disconnected from their own emotional continuity. Without the constant and loving presence of loved ones, their memories can also gradually fade in the patient's mind. For Frank, it started a long time ago, not when he was lying motionless in a hospital bed, but with the unanswered messages, the unanswered calls, the attempts to speak and then not. Gradually, he became an outsider in his own story, unable to argue, unable to express, unable to choose, only silence that stretched like an unspoken reproach. People have asked, does Frank want to come back? But perhaps the real question is, do we still have time to make Frank feel that he was never forgotten? For Mike and Danielle, the answer now lies not in words. It lies in actions, not in mending a broken friendship, but in preserving a fragile life that needs to be loved. This trial is unlike any other. There are no arguments, no convictions. This is not a place to find out who is right and who is wrong. This is a place to listen, to look back, to face the things that have never been said. A place where every glance, every breath is filled with regret, because sometimes just a moment of lack of attention can lead to something that cannot be changed. The judge, a woman in her 60s with silver hair and a gentle gaze, could not hide her emotions as she listened to Mike and Danielle's testimony. We often think of the law as dry regulations, applying only terms and rules. But she emphasized that sometimes our duty is to listen. And today, what matters is not who has the power to decide for Frank, but who will always be there for him, with complete love. Her words are not just a legal statement. They are a reminder of emotional responsibility, an element often forgotten in the world of showbiz. Because behind the aura of fame, behind the laughter on the screen, there are still real people, with feelings, with wounds, and sometimes regrets. Mike and Danielle admitted their mistakes without blaming the situation or each other. There were no legal changes, no accusations or arguments. They didn't commit to legal terms, just heartfelt apologies, tearful promises, and a pledge that they would never leave Frank alone again. In civil trials, the plaintiffs sue, the defendants counter. But here, the most touching moment came from an unscripted agreement that Frank deserved to be cared for by people who truly loved him. When Danielle said, "I'm not here to fight for custody. I'm here because I owe Frank an apology and a new promise." The courtroom fell silent. It wasn't just emotion, it was undeniable truth. The trial also put to rest all the previous speculation about Mike and Frank's relationship, that they were irreconcilable, that Danielle had chosen sides, that their rift was about money or fame. All of that was wrong. The truth was deeper, more complicated, and more human. They were simply people who loved each other, but now no longer understood each other. When the media first reported on the case, many thought it was Mike's last-ditch effort to salvage his image. But after the hearing, the public changed their minds, not because of the eloquent speeches, but because they saw a real person facing his pain. Mike didn't try to appease the public. In the courtroom, he tried to mend a relationship with an old friend. The greatest value of this trial was not the final verdict, but the right to share the truth publicly. In today's society, where misinformation and public relations rule, the rare moments when celebrities stand up and share the truth are not only a way to restore trust, but also a way to heal lasting wounds. For American Pickers fans, the truth is now more precious than any season update. They don't need more episodes. They just need to know that Mike, Frank, and Danielle were a part of each other, a real part of each other's lives. When the hearing ended, the judge didn't rule on who won or lost. She just asked for further medical reports on Frank's condition and insisted that all parties remain involved in Frank's life. It was a decision that was both legal and humane. As they left the courthouse, Mike said nothing to reporters. Danielle just nodded slightly, but their eyes no longer averted. They had finally said what needed to be said, not to seek immediate forgiveness, but to begin the slow process of healing. And perhaps, even though he couldn't speak, Frank felt it too. As the courtroom lights dimmed and the papers were gently folded, Mike and Danielle left the room, eyes red but steps firm. The moment was no longer a painful farewell, but a beginning. The beginning of a new commitment, born of what seemed irreparable. During the hearing, Mike and Danielle made one thing unmistakably clear. They were not here to seek forgiveness, but to change. Gone were the superficial apologies and glossy press statements, replaced by a simple but profound promise. We will never leave Frank alone again. Mike, who had been criticized for being cold and obsessed with fame, declared that he would visit Frank regularly, regardless of Frank's cognitive state. I can't change the past, but I can be present in the present, Mike said. A simple statement, but for someone who has always been quiet, it was a profound change. Danielle, who had long played the role of mediator, was no longer in the middle. She stood beside Frank. I will be there for Frank, whether he misses me or not, whether we can talk or not. The important thing is that he is no longer alone, she declared in court, and her presence was not just a physical one, but an emotional commitment, something Frank had lacked in his later years. While neither of them expected things to return to the way they were, and their friendship may never be the same, what they hoped for, and what the public saw, was sincerity. In a world of pain and lingering emotional wounds, sincerity is the first step toward healing. After the hearing, American Pickers fans flooded social media with touching messages. I don't need Frank back on the show, I just need to know he's being cared for by people who once treated him like family, one fan wrote on Reddit. The comments weren't meant to glorify Mike or Danielle, but rather to acknowledge that sometimes we don't need a perfect ending, just one that shows real effort. The media also responded positively, with outlets like People and Entertainment Weekly calling the hearing a rare example of unscripted public repentance. Forgiveness, if it comes, will come through action, not speeches or PR campaigns. Reconnecting doesn't mean starting over. For Mike and Danielle, it simply means being there when needed. It might mean calling when there's no answer, visiting when there's no recognition, continuing to love when there's no return. This is not a lesson just for celebrities, but for all of us. No matter how much time has passed, no matter how deep the pain has gone, if there is still a single piece of memory, a single spark of emotion, or a single action, we can still find a way back to each other. And in that moment, when Mike put his hand on Danielle's shoulder before they both left the courtroom, It was understood that this was not the end of a television journey. It was the beginning of a human journey, with all its flaws, apologies, and attempts at redemption. The story of Mike Wolfe, Danielle Colby, and Frank Fritz is more than just a difficult television show. It is the quiet tragedy of a forgotten friendship, a seemingly irreparable silence, and finally a confrontation with the truth, a belated apology, and a commitment to always be there. They have overcome the shadow of fame to perform a simple but meaningful act, to restore their humanity. The hearing did not end with a shocking verdict or declaration, but instead with an admission that sometimes the greatest mistakes come not from malice, but from long-term indifference. Yet it is from this admission that a new path is opened, a path of repair through sincere and compassionate action, not flowery. If there is a lesson to be learned from this story, it is a simple yet profound message. Don't let apologies be delayed. Don't let important friends feel forgotten. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. If you find the content interesting, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next interesting videos. See you in the next videos. Today, we will explore a story that has shocked many people. Rick Harrison, once known as a symbol of American humor, trustworthiness, and success, is now facing serious charges in federal court. From a TV star loved by millions of viewers, Rick suddenly appeared in handcuffs, prosecuted in connection with a series of shocking crimes, from money laundering, illegal detention, to participating in an organized crime ring that spanned the international scope. What makes the public wonder is, how could someone who was once considered a familiar face, close to the audience for many years, be involved in such cruel and dangerous acts? What lies behind the friendly facade and successful image? What hidden corners have been hidden for so long? Join us as we delve into this shocking case to find out the truth behind one of American television's most surprising falls. In the early morning of April 13, 2025, Las Vegas was still bright and bustling with casinos, lavish shows, and endless crowds. But inside the Clark County Courthouse, the atmosphere was the complete opposite: heavy, tense, and filled with suspense. Dozens of reporters, media cameras, and a curious crowd crowded in silence, waiting for a trial unlike any before. Rick Harrison, once a familiar face on American television, was brought to the dock. The man once praised for his intelligence, wit, and charisma now appeared with his head bowed, his hands cuffed, without a word of defense. The confident, decisive image once associated with him in the public's mind was now reduced to a dazed, exhausted look. In a packed courtroom, the judge began reading the nearly 200-page indictment, a litany of serious crimes that left the courtroom speechless. Human trafficking, false imprisonment, money laundering, organized abuse, and running a global criminal network. According to the prosecution, Rick was not just a player. He was the mastermind, the architect, and the operator of the entire system. The superficial activities of the adult entertainment stores and the financial transactions at the casinos were just a cover for a sophisticated network built to profit from human suffering. For nearly 5 years, the system had operated smoothly under Rick's direct supervision. The evidence came one by one: security cameras, handwritten documents, encrypted emails, and heartbreaking testimony from victims, all of which gradually painted a grim picture of a well-coordinated and cold-blooded organization. The more evidence was revealed, the harder it was for the public to accept the truth, that a former television icon could be behind such a ruthless organization. And then the fateful moment came, when the judge announced the verdict. A suffocating silence fell over the room. Rick Harrison was officially sentenced to death. No reaction, no tears, no pleas, only closed eyes as if he had predicted this day. A heartbreaking cry rang out from the audience. It was a mother who had lost her daughter in mystery for many years. The atmosphere was stifling, as if it contained all the resentment and anger that had been pent up for too long. Outside the court, the crowd held banners calling for justice, while international media outlets quickly reported the news. CNN, BBC, Reuters all updated every detail of this shocking event. In less than a day, the hashtag #RickHarrison death penalty has attracted millions of social media discussions, spreading across the globe. From a beloved television icon, Rick Harrison is now at the center of one of the most shocking cases in the history of the entertainment industry. A story that makes the whole world look back at the dark side of fame, where the halo can obscure the most terrifying truths. While some fans still cling to the belief that it was all a misunderstanding, anti-trafficking organizations are adamant. This is the beginning of a journey to expose a crime that has been going on in the shadows. What motivated prosecutors to pursue the harshest punishment was not just the sheer scale of the crime, but the sophistication and ruthlessness with which Rick Harrison designed and ran a years-long system of exploitation. Every transaction was encrypted, every victim was turned into an anonymous code, and any trace that could have given away the secret was erased. There was no room for chance. It was all calculated with cold, chilling precision. In the words of a senior FBI investigator, this wasn't a mistake. This was an empire perfectly disguised as a television show. The first trial was not simply a trial of an individual, but a key that opened the door to a series of dark events behind the lights of Las Vegas. Rick Harrison was just the face on the surface. Behind him was a sophisticated machine with hidden characters, people who never appeared on screen but who protected and maintained the existence of a fierce underground world. That empire was built not only with money, but with the pain and silence of hundreds of people who were turned into commodities. Rick Harrison, the man who inspired millions of Americans with his story of rising from nothing, was once the embodiment of the American dream. Starting out in a small shop run by his father, Rick impressed with his intelligence and sharp negotiating skills. The program Porn Stars not only brought him to millions of viewers, but also turned him into a pop culture phenomenon. Rick's witty haggling, rare antiques, and tough-talking voice have been etched into the public's memory for nearly 15 years on the air. But while the TV spotlight was shining brightly, a criminal network was quietly taking shape behind the scenes. It was no longer a world of antiques and rare paintings, but of cold discussions about human fate. By 2009, when the show went on air and viewership spiked, the small shop in a sleepy residential area had become a magnet for customers and revenue. Rick became a symbol of success, making media appearances, signing books, giving speeches, and becoming the face of the entire city of Las Vegas. But that fame provided the perfect mask for the horrors that lay behind it. Rick wasn't just running a business. He was hiding a criminal network that ran like a Swiss watch. From shell companies to anonymous accounts, everything is designed to legitimize the profits from exploiting people as commodities. And the truth is only the beginning. The secrets that lie beneath the cover may reveal more names, more parts of a giant machine that few could ever imagine could exist in the heart of America's most famous entertainment city. Investigative records reveal that between 2016 and 2022, Rick Harrison was behind or controlled at least 6 shell companies, all of which were opaque, with no websites, no visible offices, and no formal employees. Yet each company received money from mysterious partners in Serbia, the UAE, Thailand, and Romania through a complex, multi-layered, and difficult-to-trace money transfer network. The network only began to unravel when the FBI launched an undercover operation called Pale Porn in late 2021. The clue came from a shipping document bearing the name RH Acquisitions LLC, a document found in the files of a house where a trafficking victim had been held. The document, dated 1974, referred to the shipment of rare items, which at first glance sounded like antiques. But according to a survivor, the phrase was just code, a reference to the people themselves who were being trafficked like merchandise. From there, the FBI began to track down each link. They combed through thousands of financial records, tracked the money, planted people in the network, and inspected every gas station and every small exchange. The reconstruction revealed a meticulous system, with Rick's porn shop at the center. Not just a front, but a key transit point for a large-scale money laundering operation. A former FBI agent who had worked on human trafficking investigations along the Mexican border testified that what made Rick's network so dangerous was not just its size, but its elaborate legitimacy. Using his television fame, Rick turned shady deals into seemingly harmless ones. For example, an $83,000 shipping contract for a 19th century African mask, an item that never appeared in the store's inventory, was signed with an anonymous company in Liechtenstein with no real address. Rick also took full advantage of the Las Vegas environment, where a flexible financial infrastructure allowed for quick and unobserved cash transactions. In 1 month, he showed up at 5 different casinos and made more than 40 currency exchanges, withdrawing more than $350,000, a classic but extremely effective money laundering technique. During the trial, prosecutors presented a complex financial chart with Rick Harrison at the center. The arrows represented the flow of money. The squares were shell companies. The connectors were anonymous victims. No matter how many layers the money passed through, the final destination was the jewelry store right in the middle of Las Vegas Boulevard. The brutality of the system cannot be measured in the number of victims or the money. It lies in the coldness of the organization, where people are coded, classified, priced, and traded like commodities. According to a former technician who worked at the store, Rick came in at 3 a.m. one night with a group of strangers. They brought big wooden crates through the back door. When I asked what was inside, he just said, "Don't pry into things you shouldn't know about." The friendly, humorous image of Rick Harrison on television, the father figure, the sharp negotiator, is slowly being replaced by a colder portrait. The architect of a sophisticated system of exploitation where laughter is just a mask for the dark secrets behind. The truth doesn't come with a bang. It often begins with a whisper, a forgotten detail, an unnoticed trace. For the FBI, the case didn't start with a TV show or a pawn shop. It started with a missing persons file, that of a 16-year-old girl named Jenna Morales from Reno, Nevada. Jenna wasn't a high-profile case, at least not at first. She disappeared after signing up for an online modeling program that had been advertised on social media. From the website to the social media accounts, everything was professionally designed, from the photos to the fake partners to the alluring invitations. She was promised an all-expenses-paid photo shoot in Los Angeles. She got on the last bus out of Reno, and no one has heard from Jenna since. Most such cases are buried under thousands of files. But this one small detail opened up a maze, and for the first time, light began to shine into the dark corners of an unsuspecting world. But what shocked the agents even more was not the scale of the network, but the way Rick Harrison ran it all, with a cold, calculating quality. Rick didn't say much during the encrypted calls, but each word was carefully chosen, as if he were controlling everything remotely, not as a cog, but as the brain behind the entire machine. Suspicion quickly turned to certainty when one of the agents discovered that the phone used during these calls was the same one Rick had used publicly on television. As the investigation deepened, the agents discovered a secret archive, a meticulous record of every shipment, every destination, every coded name. Some of the records involved unofficial ports and shipping routes that didn't appear on conventional maps. This network, it turned out, was not only located in Las Vegas, but also spread to other countries, operating silently but effectively, both as a place to transfer money and to hide people who were considered as commodities. A veteran agent exclaimed, "This is no longer a normal criminal group. This is a machine, and Rick Harrison is the main operator of it. No detail is left out. Everything is calculated like a closed tactical map." With the evidence piling up, the FBI launched many raids at related locations. The result was documents clearly printed with Rick's traces, from shipping contracts, coded notes, to seemingly innocuous receipts, all showing his deep role in organizing, coordinating, and concealing unforgivable acts. Many of the documents even listed the goods being shipped, which later turned out to be young girls ranging from teens to adults, with code names, prices, and detailed routes. From the recordings, to the transaction codes, to the discovered storage facilities, every detail painted a portrait of Rick Harrison that was completely different from the cheerful, approachable image the public once knew. No longer the comedic TV dad, Rick was now seen as the designer of a giant, sophisticated machine hiding in the shadows of celebrity and legitimate business. More than 60 cases of young girls disappearing across the United States, from Nevada to Florida, from Ohio to Texas, had all been linked to the activities of RH Acquisitions, LLC. The strange records, codes, and papers that were initially thought to be a system error now became a complete piece of a dark puzzle. And at the center of it all, none other than Rick Harrison, the man who turned the pain and disappearance of dozens of victims into part of his cold and ruthless operating model. While pretending to use archaic business language experts confirmed that the phrases appearing in the notes were in fact near-exact copies of the terminology commonly used in international human trafficking networks. From there, a dark picture emerged. A famous television entrepreneur once associated with the negotiation of antiques was quietly operating a complex system where people were transported like commodities. It all started with a name, Jenna Morales. She might have been forgotten forever if not for a misdirected invoice with the strange note, item 1874. From that moment on, the question was no longer whether Rick was involved, but who else was behind it, how many victims were still unknown, and how the system had been able to operate so smoothly for 5 years without being detected. The most obvious answer, however, came not from interrogations or financial records. It was behind a soundproof wall in an old warehouse on East Sahara Avenue in Las Vegas. A black, leather-bound notebook, seemingly forgotten for years, was found in a narrow concrete compartment, hidden behind wood paneling and insulation. There was no lock, no storage box, just a thin layer of dust, as if it had always been waiting to be discovered. When the first page was turned, all doubts disappeared. Inside were handwritten notes in black and blue ink, detailing transactions not about antiques or art, but about people. Each person was described by a code number, age, gender, nationality, personality traits, and destination. No names, no pictures, just empty numbers, 6318. Each entry was a human life. 230 entries in total, representing at least 230 victims. But what was more haunting was not the number, but the way Rick wrote it. There was no hesitation, no emotion. The lines flowed smoothly, as neatly as in an accounting book, suggesting that this was no spur-of-the-moment action. It was systematic. It was planned. It was power expressed in every stroke. The notebook was not meant to be secretive. It was like a silent declaration that Rick Harrison had never feared being discovered. Because for him, everything was so perfectly controlled. The FBI's forensics department quickly sent the notebook to the lab for analysis. The results confirmed that the handwriting in the notebook matched Rick Harrison's signature and other documents over the years. In addition, experts analyzed the pressure and stroke frequency of the handwriting, indicating that it was natural, not forced or forged. The last page of the notebook drew a detailed diagram outlining how a transnational human trafficking network operated, recruiting victims from Eastern Europe, using fake passports through Serbia, entering the United States through Canada, and finally distributing them through transit points in Nevada, Utah, and Arizona. The points were coded, each courier was numbered, drop-off points were prioritized, and victims were categorized by age, health, English proficiency, and compliance. The notebook was not just a record of crimes, but a blueprint for an entire criminal empire. When the notebook was presented at trial, the prosecutor described it as irrefutable, incontrovertible, and unmistakable evidence. Each detail in the notebook silenced the courtroom, as if time had frozen. One juror could not bear it and left his seat. Another burst into tears as he read a description of a 13-year-old girl being trafficked to Asia with the chilling note, "High class, no pathology, good health." When asked about the notebook, Rick Harrison chose to remain absolutely silent. There was no denial or confession. His attorney argued that Rick may have been tricked and that the notebook may have been forged, but the evidence contradicted everything. The handwriting was verified, the locations matched GPS data and the victim's missing times, and the information in the notebook matched exactly with over 30 emails leaked from the Rare Find Logistics system, a front company Rick owned through 3 entities in the Cayman Islands. The notebook was more than physical evidence. It was the living ledger of a shadowy criminal organization, with no electronic copies, no servers, all written in blue ink as a symbol of power and control. Rick trusted his notes more than his digital security system. But this complacency became his condemnation. When the notebook was made public, the case became more than an investigation. It became a fact, etched into each yellowed page. Rick Harrison's name would no longer be associated with stores or bestsellers. Instead, it will be recorded in the federal criminal record, alongside the most vicious human traffickers in modern history. What really made this case irreversible, however, was the moral testimony from those closest to Rick. When those closest to him came forward, the truth became more than just an investigation. It was the most severe punishment for the criminal's character. In court, the fatal blows came from 2 people, Rick's son, Corey Harrison, and Austin Chumley Russell, his best friend and companion for years. When Corey entered the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. He was no longer the confident, witty young man the audience had come to love. Instead, he was a haggard, hollow-eyed man who walked slowly, his hands shaking as he took the stand. He was no longer Rick's son. He was the one who carried the pain and disappointment of a betrayed child. When the prosecutor asked, "Who are you?" Corey was silent for a long time, then answered with a choked voice, "I am Corey Harrison, the son of Richard Kevin Harrison." The whole courtroom fell silent. Corey recounted that from 2019 he began to notice changes in his father. Secret meetings, doors locked from the outside, something that had never happened before. "One night I went back to the store near midnight to get a computer, and I heard a baby crying from the storage room. I knocked on the door, but no one answered. The next day I asked my dad, and he just looked at me and said, 'Don't ask questions you don't want to know the answers to.' That was the first time I was afraid of him. From then on, Corey was removed from all access, his account was deleted, and he was not allowed to enter the assessment area, which Rick had completely soundproofed. It was that exclusion that made Corey decide to stand on the side of justice. One day, Corey accidentally opened a misdirected shipment. Inside were not the usual antiques, but a box of files and photos of young girls. Each photo had an identification code and their current condition. Corey was terrified. When he confronted his father, Rick coldly said, "Close it and forget what you just saw." Those words made Corey collapse. That night, he left home, cut off contact with his father, quit the TV show, and gave up the family business. While the media reported that Corey disappeared due to work conflicts, no one knew that behind his silence was a nightmare that was tearing his mind apart day by day. At the trial, when questioned by the defense attorney whether he was making up the story because of the conflict with his father, Corey just looked at Rick, who was sitting not far away, and answered, his voice choked, "I'm not making this up. This is a nightmare that I can't erase from my mind." He continued chokingly, "I don't want to believe that the father I once respected could do these things, but he never denied it. He just kept silent, and that silence was the answer." The courtroom fell into heavy silence, while Rick just looked forward, not reacting. Unlike Corey, Austin Chumley Russell is not a family member, but he has accompanied Rick for more than 2 decades, since before the cameras appeared. On the show Pawn Stars, Chumley is funny, clumsy, and lovable. But when he steps into the courtroom, all innocence disappears. His face hardened, no longer joking. He carried the truth heavy in his heart. Chumley said that before he thought Rick's sneaky actions were just a trick to evade taxes or take advantage of legal loopholes, not thinking it was anything too serious. But since 2018, what he witnessed made him suspicious. There were nights when Rick came to the store at 2, 3 a.m. with a familiar driver and a white truck stopped at the back door. They unloaded unmarked wooden crates. Then Rick called and said something that Chumley remembered clearly. "Item 27 is in storage. Dispose of discreetly." When Chumley once jokingly asked if it was an alien artifact, Rick didn't laugh, just glared at him and said, "Don't joke about things you don't understand." Chumley said that moment made his blood run cold. Late one night in 2021, Chumley came home from work late at night and heard strange noises coming from the storage area. Banging, a baby crying. When he told Rick the next morning, he was told, "You must have misheard. If you're smart, don't ever mention it again." From that day on, Chumley lived torn between loyalty and suspicion, between happy memories and what he feared he had unwittingly helped. When the mysterious notebook was made public, recording the same codes that Rick had said over the radio, Chumley knew he couldn't keep quiet. "I used to turn a blind eye," he says, "but I can't take that guilt to the grave." Despite being attacked for his drug-related past in 2016, Chumley stood his ground. "I made a mistake, but I've never seen a human being treated like a commodity. And when I saw it, I couldn't stay silent." Despite coming from different backgrounds, Corey and Chumley both share one undeniable truth. They loved Rick Harrison, and now they are the ones who brought him to light. When the codes and notes matched what Rick had said over the radio, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. It wasn't something I could ignore, and I couldn't take that silence with me to the grave. During cross-examination, the defense tried to use Chumley's drug history in 2016 to discredit him. But Chumley didn't back down. "I've made mistakes," he said, "but I've never seen anyone treated like a commodity. When I saw that, I couldn't keep quiet." Although they came from different paths, Corey and Chumley had something in common. They had once trusted Rick Harrison, and now they were the ones who dared to bring the truth about him to light. After their testimony, the atmosphere in the courtroom changed immediately. This was no longer a simple case about money or business intrigue. It was a tragedy of betrayal. A man who had once been a father figure, a respected boss, had now quietly turned those close to him into victims of lies, fear, and silence. As the trial drew to a close, the public began to realize something bigger. Rick Harrison's actions were not just illegal, they were crimes against humanity. Then, one by one, people stood up. 7 people. And the room became a symbol of a nightmare society doesn't want to face: human trafficking. A crime so well hidden, yet the money it generates still leaves a trail, legal, clean, and seemingly untraceable. In Rick Harrison's hands, human exploitation went beyond late-night shipments and secret soundproof rooms. It became a meticulously designed, multi-layered money laundering system, cleverly disguised as a legitimate business. At the heart of the scheme was a series of shell companies, mostly registered in loosely regulated places like Nevada, Delaware, and the British Virgin Islands. Each company had a specific role: receiving money, shipping, recording expenses, and obscuring the transactions of the items. Rick's model was highly layered, making the money flow through multiple layers, obscuring the trail. A prime example was a payment of $85,000 from a European collector to Golden Ledger Holdings, one of Rick's companies. The payment was recorded as a purchase of a 19th century African tribal mask, but there was no record of its appraisal, sale, or display. After the money was received, it was routed through 2 other companies, one recorded as a storage expense, the other as a shipping expense, before being reinvested in art. Within 72 hours, the money was broken down into 5 transactions, moving through 3 banks in Cyprus, Dubai, and an unnamed country. By then, the money had become legitimate income, leaving no trace. Another method Rick used was through casinos. According to records from the Nevada Financial Controller, Rick made at least 37 high-value chip purchases over 14 months, totaling more than $350,000. The process was simple. Cash in for chips, play a few low-limit games, then cash in the chips for winnings, all below the $10,000 threshold to avoid reporting. In November 2021, Rick withdrew $7,400 from 5 different ATMs each time for a total of $37,000, all below the warning threshold. But when put together, these transactions form a classic money-spattering model, similar to how drug cartels launder money. The final and most dangerous weapon is art. This has long been an area of financial control, thanks to the ambiguity of its value and lack of provenance. A painting simply labeled rare and given a rough appraisal can sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars. In one transaction, a sketch purported to be a Picasso 1914 sold for $120,000 through an art dealer. However, upon investigation, an expert confirmed that it was simply an internet print, aged with tea stains and sandpaper. The gold and silver pawn shop was more than just a pawn shop. It actually operated as a sophisticated money laundering operation. Items were shown on television, bought for astronomical prices, and then disappeared without a trace. No resale, no storage, no proper receipts. Investigators quickly realized that the items were just a front to legitimize the flow of illegal money. A $65,000 watch was actually worth less than $3,000, but it was used to transfer money to trafficking partners in Eastern Europe. The network also included real estate, where vaults and underground rooms were disguised as commercial premises. A building in Henderson was purchased for $190,000, but just 3 months later sold for $465,000 to a Malaysian company linked to a global child trafficking network. The building was never used for its intended purpose. It was simply a vehicle for phony transactions, in which real estate values were inflated to hide ill-gotten gains. What was shocking was the global interconnectedness of the network. Investigations by the Federal Tax Investigation Bureau and Interpol revealed that at least 12 countries, including Singapore, Romania, Serbia, Belgium, and the UAE, were involved in the scheme. Each country played a part, from receiving money, moving people, forging documents, to legitimizing transactions. When the money map was presented in court, a giant diagram emerged with a series of transaction codes, arrows, and dates, all leading to a single name: Rick Harrison. He was not just the initiator, but also the coordinator of the entire network, like a CEO running a system, with specialized subsidiaries, from storage, transportation, valuation, payment, to wiping the traces. The Justice Department's financial experts have confirmed that this system could not have come about by accident. It was the product of meticulous planning, exploiting legal loopholes and hiding behind a TV celebrity. Rick Harrison raised money laundering to a fine art, and behind the funny moments and humorous deals on reality TV, there was a complex criminal network, powered by silence, fame, and dirty money. 8. The trial ended. The final verdict was delivered in the crisp January air of Nevada. It had been more than 11 months since Rick Harrison was arrested. More than 10,000 pages of documents, 97 hearings, 43 witnesses, and 4 victims had been brought before the court. This trial was not about one individual. Everyone understood that Rick Harrison was the symbol of a system of open crime, where evil no longer had to hide, but was dressed in a glamorous television cover. The courtroom was silent as the judge rose. Before him was not just a sentence of a man, but a powerful statement of facts. After listing the full list of charges ranging from human trafficking, money laundering, false imprisonment, to running an organized crime organization, he announced, "Given the gravity of the offense, the number of victims, and the overwhelming evidence, the court sentenced Richard Kevin Harrison, a.k.a. Rick Harrison, to death by lethal injection." There was no applause, no cheers, only a choked sigh from the back row, where the family of one of the victims had sat, and silent tears. Rick sat silently. He did not protest, did not defend himself, did not show remorse. Perhaps he knew it was all over when the evidence was clear. His own notebook, a cell built right under his office, and a series of financial transactions bearing his name. The media broadcast the trial live as a global event. Major news outlets ran sensational headlines: TV star Rick Harrison from icon to death penalty. Outrage quickly spread across forums, social media, and political commentary programs. Criticism mounted over the leniency of society toward celebrities and the indifference of the entertainment industry to clear warning signs. The question kept ringing: how could this case have gone on for so many years without anyone noticing? Urgent hearings were held in the U.S. Congress. A group of lawmakers proposed new laws requiring expanded background checks on television companies and independent entertainment entities. At the same time, the United Nations Human Rights Council called for an international investigation into the cross-border network involved in the Rick Harrison case. What started as a simple criminal case quickly grew into a global scandal involving abuse of power, media manipulation, and commercial conspiracies. But amid all the legal, political, and institutional backlash, Rick Harrison's fans were the most pitiful victims. Not only did they lose their beloved reality TV show, they also had to face the harsh truth. Under the bright spotlight, sometimes there are dark, cruel shadows that are hard to imagine. Rick Harrison's story is more than just a star's fall. It is a warning about the power, the aura, and the terrifying silence that the media can maintain for years. Because behind every bright smile on screen, there may be a truth that has been buried for too long. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. Thank you for watching.